Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. My name is Rick Nuske, and I'm sure if you're a long-term listener, you know I have some fantastic guests on the show, and today is no different. Today I'm actually talking with somebody who is totally blind, and he is the son of a carnival owner, and we're going to be talking about his new book, and we're going to talk about his backstory. We're going to learn a little bit about Mr. Maxwell Ivey. How are you, Max?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing, Rick?
Mate, I'm very well, very well. So I am looking through your write-up here. It says you're a blogger, you're a life coach, public speaker, award winner, and the list goes on and on. So we normally just sort of start off with a bit of a backstory. Tell us about yourself, Max.
Well, I am a totally blind gentleman from Houston, Texas, who grew up in a family of carnival owners.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to work alongside my dad and my brothers and actually help run the business for about 10 years before his death caused the closure of our small show.
Mm-hmm.
Needing something to do with myself, I decided to help other people sell their surplus rides, and that meant starting a website, which, about 10 years ago, being online was brand new to a lot of people, and it was especially new to me, so I had a lot of stuff I had to learn, including how to hand code HTML, recruit clients, set fees, and a lot of other things that go along with running your own business.
Mm-hmm.
People thought that what I was doing was inspiring. They kept saying, Max, if anybody had a reason to just sit at home and watch the TV, you do, but you don't. So we want to hear more from you, and that led to me starting a second website, which is called theblindblogger.net.
Mm-hmm.
And really the reason that they called me that is because most people online, most people in the world for that matter, either don't have any friends who are visually impaired, or they might know one person.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to be that one person online, so I became known as the Blind Blogger.
Yep.
And it's turned out to be a pretty good brand name, actually, for one I didn't pick myself.
Often that can be the case. So I'm looking at the fact that you're the leader of the No Excuses movement, and this is really the crux of why I've invited you on the show today, Max, is because I'm hearing a lot of excuses from people about why they can't achieve something. There is just 101 excuses as to why they can't do these things, and I'd love to hear from you the reasons why they can't.
Well, a lot of it is overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody decides they want to do something, they start making a list of the things they'll have to do or learn how to do. They think about what kind of money or skills or resources they'll need, and they start making that list, and it gets longer and longer, and the next thing they know, like, there's no way this will ever happen. Mm-hmm. I don't have that much time left in my life, or I don't have that much time in my day. And they decided, since it is such a big objective, that they're not going to try.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, it's a matter of they are comfortable enough with where they are not to want to risk things being worse.
Mm.
A lot of people, they're like, well, it can't get worse. My dad used to always say, yes, it can get worse, and it will get worse quickly as soon as you say it can't get worse.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. It's Murphy's Law almost, isn't it?
Yeah, almost. But, no matter how bad your day is, no matter how bad your situation is, it's what you're used to. And, some people come at that and they'll go, well, if I just do this, it would get a little better. But most people are like, what if I do that and nothing happens, or even so, it gets worse than where I'm at right now. And so that's I think those are two of our main reasons: is overwhelm and fear of change, or just being comfortable enough with where you are right this minute.
So essentially a fear of failure and I guess lack of process, maybe.
Yeah, and I think fear of failure, not even failure, even fear of embarrassment or looking silly,
Mm-hmm.
Can be a big part of it. I like to tell people that life ain't the Olympics. They don't award style points, so stop trying to win them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I look at this the background that you have in amusement equipment and related items. The ideology, the approach you take, and I guess the attitude that you have to this, given that our audience are business minded, business centric, we talk a lot about personal development. We talk about a lot about process. What are some of the processes that you would encourage people to employ that are just starting out? I know we've talked about this written list, and I think we've all suffered this idea that if I just write a list, it's all going to get done. What would be something that's more effective than I guess brain dumping on a piece of paper?
Right. Well, I think the best way for me to explain this would be to give people a little bit of an example. When I started my first business, it's called the Midway Marketplace. It's at midwaymarketplace.com. I still work there. Mm-hmm. Although selling amusement equipment is not a good way to try to make a living. I would not recommend it to anybody. I'm only doing it because at one time I didn't know what else I could do. And at that point, I had a pretty limited view of myself and my abilities, so I went with something that I was comfortable, familiar with, and it's worked for me. But I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. Just like I wouldn't recommend being part of the fun fair or carnival business either if you just didn't absolutely have to. Those are hard ways to make a living. Mm-hmm. But when I first started, I decided I was through being a carnival owner, that had passed me by, and I needed to finally accept that I was going to do something different. If I was going to do it, I had to do it as a professional, which meant I had to take some step to show to me and other people that I was doing this seriously. So I did. I filed for a domain name, and I had been thinking about one for a long time, so I knew what I wanted to call myself, but I had never actually done it, because once I did it, then I'd have to go, well, if I have a domain name, how do I actually get a website and go online? Mm-hmm. So I was doing this event in East Texas called the Texas Pecan Festival. It's in Groves, Texas. It's an event my family's done for 40-something years. And we had perfect weather. My booth was full of toys. People were out spending money. They just didn't spend any of it with me. And I decided that weekend, I'm like, if I didn't get them this week, I ain't never going to get them. So I went home, and on Monday morning I called my brother up. I go, look, Michael, we got to do something different. I've got to actually take a step. So I want to get the domain name, but I don't know how to do it. And he said he would file for it for me. So I sent him $20, because back then that's what a year's worth of a registry cost you. Mm-hmm. And he filed for the domain name, and I said, okay, Michael, now we have a domain. What are we going to do with it? And he went and he created a really simple 4-page website for me that included a thing from SourceForge that would allow me to add listings to the site without having to know how it happened, just actually do it. Yep. And that worked great for about 6 months, and then Michael got a really high-paying job. So I had to learn how to build, expand, and rebuild this website when I broke it. And I broke it a lot. And the thing was I needed to figure out how to run my own site until I could get comfortable enough to ask somebody else to do it, or until I could afford to hire somebody else to do it. So I started asking people a bunch of questions online, and I finally got directed to the w3cschool.org.
Oh, yes.
I went on there and I went through their tutorials. I did one section at a time. I did homepage. I did links. I did images. I did colors. And colors is where I really messed up on my website, because as a blind person, I figured don't try to pick your colors by numbers. Try to pick them by names, because then, you're pretty safe. So I picked yellow for the background, blue for the text, and red for the link text. Mm-hmm. And that sounded pretty good to me. Unfortunately, I would find out later that yellow was like a really eye-screaming yellow, and the blue was navy, and the red was brick. And when people click the links, so it would remind you which links you'd already seen before, those were like fluorescent orange. And on top of that, I had no way to edit images. So when people would send me images, I would just put them on the website, whatever size they sent them to me. So I'd have 2 or 3 or 4 different size images on the same page with each other. I've been told that Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder could have had an argument over this thing. It was so bright.
That's classic.
I mean, it was out there. But here's But I just kept doing the next thing. I started asking people if they would list equipment with me. I reached out to my dad's friends and associates, and people they started. A few of them started letting me sell their equipment, and the first thing I ever sold was a little kiddie ride called a pig train, sold for $3,000, and I've never been so happy to cash a $300 check. That was back when you still got checks in the mail as opposed to PayPal and other things. But,
Yep.
I just kept doing the next job in line, build the website, recruit the clients, post the listings, advertise the listings. And then, of course, you have to go, well, how do I promote? What's the next thing? And everybody said, well, if you're going to have a website, you got to be on social media. Then they would say, if you're going to have a website, you got to have a blog. So I started a blog. And then using my blog and a video somebody sent me, I sold a carousel that several other big-time brokers weren't able to sell. And so I'm like, well, video has to be the thing. So I started recording videos.
Mm-hmm.
And each time, as people have told me, well, you got to be doing this, or this is something that will really help you, I would go, okay, well, how do I do it? And I would just do my best to learn how to do it. And if I couldn't figure it out, I would just start asking people who were already doing it and go, well, how do you do that? And sometimes they would tell me, and sometimes they would say, well, if I'm going to do that, you're going to pay me.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people would just show up and go, Max, I notice you're having a problem. I'd like to help you out with it. So, that's the way I approach all this stuff. And I think that especially with business people, with new business people,
mm-hmm.
focus on the thing in front of you. Try to condense it down to what you need to do today, this hour, this week. And I know it's hard, but try to just put the stuff from next month or next year out of your mind, because you can't do it all. Even if you had unlimited resources, you couldn't do it all or hire enough people. You're going to have to let something slide. Something ain't going to get done.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. Nobody can do it all. And I tell people all the time, if you see a coach or a guru or somebody advertising on TV or the web, and they're giving you the impression they're doing it all by themselves, all that means is that they're hiding the help from you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really powerful way to look at it, because although I agree from a very fundamental level that you do need, quote-unquote mentors and coaches, it's oftentimes those who willingly and openly give of themselves for free, essentially, that you get the most benefit from.
And a lot of times, if somebody reaches out to you for free when you are in a position to hire them, who are you going to hire?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in the process of finishing my third book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And my editor is Lorraine Regularly. She's at wordingwell.com.
Mm-hmm.
And, she originally reached out to me to tell me that my images weren't appearing properly on my blog posts.
All right.
And that they were blocking out some of the text where people couldn't read the posts, and so she helped me figure out what was causing that, and it turned out it was a glitch in the app that I use for my blogging called Mars Edit, and she helped me figure out how to fix it so that all my images were later centered as best as they could be without me being able to edit the dimensions of these images.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did that. A while later, she reached out to me because she had an idea for a blog post, and I liked it. And me and her and another woman wrote a post called 14 Advantages to Being Blind. It was a real funny, tongue-in-cheek kind of post that we had a lot of fun writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in 14, when I wrote Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, I knew that I needed somebody to make the book visually appealing before I uploaded it to Amazon to CreateSpace and stuff like that. And, there she was. So you are right. A lot of times, doing a little work for free or for less than you would usually charge is a great way to build a business relationship. Just make sure you aren't doing it so cheap or aren't giving away so much that you put yourself in a financial bind or in a time bind.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, this value first mentality is important. You talked a little bit about, you touched on at least positive attitudes, and I just want to come back to this stage of your life where you were faced with the challenge of losing over 250 pounds. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Well, I had been trying to lose weight on my own. I've always been trying to lose weight. I'm one of these people who's always been overweight, sometimes more than other times.
Mm-hmm.
When I was seeing a doctor who asked me if I would just go listen to the people at a seminar on gastric surgery, and I decided to go down and listen to them, and they told me two things right away that I really liked. They said, one, that it is not a quick fix or a guarantee because only about 50% of people who have a gastric procedure lose 80 to 90% of the weight that they need to lose and keep it off.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing they said is that this is going to take hard work. You're going to have to make a lot of changes in your life for you to be successful with it. And once I found out that I was going to have to put some work into it, I was fine. I'm probably one of these people who makes life harder for myself than it has to be, because it's just one of those old beliefs in me. If it sounds like it's too easy, then it probably is. There's probably something that I haven't found out about it yet that I need to know. But once they told me I would have to do some work, and that some of the things I had to do was, I had to learn about portion size and swapping liquids for solids,
Mm-hmm.
drinking more water, avoiding caffeine. There's lots of small changes that I had to make. And one of the lessons that I've really taken with me that I didn't really think about much until I started preparing for the surgery was what one of the nutritionists said, and that was, we're going to tell you have to make lots of changes, but don't go thinking about having to make all those changes at once. All we want you to do is to pick one.
Mm.
Do one thing for the next 30 days. And once you feel like you have that one managed for 30 days, if you do, then go on to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, then continue working on that one for another 30 days. But they said what we hope for is that by the time you have this surgery, you will have made 3 or 4 or 5 changes to the way you eat, exercise, sleep, whatever, and that you'll be well on your way to having these new habits that will serve you well after you have the surgery. And in my case, that's exactly how it's worked out. But it's one of those things. How they say that there may be millions of bloggers online or thousands of podcasters, but it all comes down to that one person saying it the way you need to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened with the lady at my surgery clinic. Is she made it real simple. We're going to ask you to make a lot of changes, but we don't need you to make them all at one time. You just need to pick one, work on that one for a while, and then add another one to it.
You can see the parallels between, starting a business and that transformational shift in mentality. I guess it's about educating yourself with the right information, hence, in a simple enough form for you to take it in and act on it, as it would be in business, and not getting too far ahead of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It is about having it delivered to you in a way that you understand. For me, it had to be simple. Some people, it might have to be more complicated. I don't know, but that is the one thing that I remind myself, though, when people go, Max, I can't write my book. Somebody's already written my book, and I'm like, well, they may have written about the same subject, but they may not have written about it with the same words, and that's usually what it comes down to. Plus, another thing I've learned over the years is, and I believe you'll agree with me on this one, the really important lessons, for some reason, we have to learn those over and over.
Over and over and over again, yeah, I do agree with that. And it seems to me that we are our own worst enemy more often than not, hence the reason we need to go through the same thing. It's what's the state of madness, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result over and over.
Yep.
So
yeah, exactly. That's the definition of madness or insanity. Yeah. And but I tell you, I can't tell you how many times I read a blog post and I'll leave a comment to the author and I'll basically say that, this is a great post, but this is one of those lessons people can't write about enough, because we all need to hear it, and we generally need to hear it more than once.
It seems you've got a very strong group of friends around you, and one of them went out of their way at some stage, reading up and through your bio and things, and they prompted you to put your life story in writing. How did that all come about, and was that a difficult journey to write a book?
Well, yes, I do have a lot of really good friends who have been encouraging me for years that I have more in me than being a ride broker.
Mm-hmm.
So, that, and a lot of times the best thing that can happen to you is to have a good friend double dog dare you. I don't know if y'all have that expression in the UK, but basically it means it's a challenge given in a way that you physically cannot refuse it. You're obligated to take it up. And
there's no backing out of this one.
There's no back. Yeah, even if no matter how stupid it is, if you've been double dog dared, you got no choice.
Oh.
So I have this friend online. Her name is Eve Koivula, and well, it's been several years ago now since the book came out in 2014, and this is almost 18. You can't believe it's getting that long ago. It was in August. So let's say about 4.5 years ago, Eve contacted me and said she wanted me to be part of an online summit. And she said, but in order to be part of a summit, you have to have a book or a product or a service, something you can either give away or that you can offer at a discount as part of being at the event. And I'm like, well, I don't really have anything like that. She said, well, why don't you write a book? And I'm like, I don't know nothing about writing a book. She said, it's easy. I'll send you a resource I have that I wrote on writing books for what do they call it? List magnets,
Oh yes, lead
things
magnets.
you can give away to get people to sign up to your email list,
Mm-hmm.
So she sent it to me and she said, but look, Max, you got a month. Why don't you start writing? And I'm sure you'll finish it. She said, I'm going to give you one of my favorite quotes. It's from Richard Branson. This is her speaking. She said, Richard likes to say, agree to do it and then figure out how. And I said, well, that sounds good in principle. I said, but, you're going to be the one that's wrong here when I don't finish this book in time for your summit. She said, just start it and see what you can do with it. So I'm writing it, and 3-4 weeks later, she gets back to me. She says, Max, there's 4 other women in this event, and they've decided for marketing purposes it would be better if it's all women. I'm like, well, look, I'm like, look, I grew up in a carnival family. I know what it is to put feet on the ground, butts in the seats, and faces behind the screen. So I wasn't upset about it. I was glad, she did tell me before I started getting really ready to do the event, as present as part of the summit.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept writing the book, and a month or so later, I finished the book, or I thought I finished. Well, actually, I didn't think I'd finished the book. I was sharing what I had of the book with a couple of my friends online, and I was of the opinion the book wasn't big enough or impressive enough or long enough. And my friends kept telling me, Max, it's a really good book. You need to stop talking about it and send it out in the world. And I showed it to a fellow coach from California who said, Max, you've written about your editor in your blog post. I know who she is. So if you don't get off your ass and send this to her to get it edited and published, I'm going to send it to her for you. And so, the next day I sent it off, and it took us a few weeks to get it edited and submit it to Amazon or CreateSpace. But I tell you, I've really gotten in love with the idea of being an author. Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light was my first book. It's Not the Cookie, It's the Bag, which is about my gastric surgery experience and the things I do even now to stay at my current weight.
Mm-hmm.
My second book, and then the one coming out soon, is about my solo trip to New York City last year as one of the Amtrak writers in residence. And it's just funny how you go 20 years without writing and you start writing blog posts and you realize, I really enjoy writing. I used to enjoy it in school, and now here it is. It's actually something that I can use to help promote people's equipment listings or share my experiences with people and maybe brighten their day or encourage them to keep going in their own business or their own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been a great rediscovery of the whole idea of writing. And I tell other writers, I don't want y'all mad at me, but I don't understand this whole idea of writer's block. I said, maybe it's a fiction versus nonfiction thing.
Mm.
But it seems to me that, especially with nonfiction, once you start writing, there are ideas for the next book or the next chapter or the next blog post. They're everywhere. I mean, they wake you up sometimes. You're like, no, I don't need another book idea. I've got plenty already.
I must say I love the title. It's not the cookie, it's the bag. That's a real memorable book title. I love it.
Yeah, it's actually the title from the first chapter I wrote as part of the book, and it's all about how in my family, I live with my mom who's 75, my brother Patrick who's 40 something, and my nephew, and we used to have a crazy dog Penny, but she's no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't tell a teenage son that there will never be another cookie in your house. So we finally, one day my nephew brought home a bag of frozen cookie dough, and he put it in the oven and baked it. And when it came out, we split it up 4 ways, and we realized that if you split one bag of cookie dough 4 ways, you get about 4 or 5 cookies apiece.
Mm-hmm.
Just enough to where you don't feel like you're never going to have another cookie, but not so many in the house where you feel like, you're going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and eat half a bag of them.
Yeah.
And that's where the first chapter came from, and that's where the title came from. And it makes perfect sense. One of the hardest things people have to do when they lose weight is learn how to cook less.
Yeah.
Especially in families.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women, they've been making the same recipe in the same quantity since they first got married. Mm-hmm. And the idea of changing the portions, making less, not having leftovers, because in principle, leftovers are a good idea. You save money, you can use them as parts of lunches and things like that. But if you're one of those people who's having trouble managing their weight, leftovers are just asking for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally have a rule: if it gets past my front door, I'm eating it. So, so I guess this is about knowing your weaknesses and turning those weaknesses into your strengths and opportunities to change your behavior.
Exactly. It's all about knowing yourself well enough to know what your triggers are. Like, for example, I have to be real careful with French bread and cornbread or biscuits. Those are 3 items which you're like, man, you can't get to be 500 or 600 pounds and your thing not be cake or cookies. But really, the thing I have trouble with is bread. And we make an effort to only bring home or bake what we actually need. And if somebody miscalculates, we don't leave them on the counter or in the stove or in the microwave. We put them in a bag and put them in the freezer. So at least you have to microwave them.
Yep, you have to prepare them, and it takes effort.
Yeah, and during that time when you're reaching into the freezer thinking about do I want to microwave these biscuits or not, might be all you need to change your mind and go, no, it ain't worth it.
I'm looking through your site as we talk here, and there's lots going on. There's obviously the About Me page, and I see it's theblindblogger.net, and I'm going to make all of your links and books available to our listeners if that's okay with you.
That's perfectly great with me. If you ever run across an author or musician or filmmaker who turns you down on that, let me know, because I want to get them some psychiatric help.
I always ask for permission rather than beg for forgiveness. So there's a lot going on there. Do you? We'll come back to what you were just about to say there. So you've got 3 books.
Well, you were going to ask me a question. You said there's a lot going on there, and I hate to interrupt somebody unless I absolutely have to.
No, look, I was the thing I was interested in the most is your coaching services. Tell us something about that.
Right. Well, I've actually had to learn something, and I need to update the website when it comes to coaching, because when people started telling me I was an inspiration, I thought I would be a life goals coach. And I tried that for a couple years, and for the most part, people will tell me I'm inspiring. They will comment on my blog or share my posts, but they did not want to hire me. So what I did notice is when will contact me about and ask me, Max, how do you get booked on all the podcasts and radio shows and YouTube channels? How do you get on virtual summits? And at first I would answer them and I would give away a lot of information for free, as you say. Sometimes this whole idea of value first can hurt you because you give away stuff you could be charging for. And I fought that for a couple of years. I kept, trying to drill down to a niche where people would want to speak to me as a coach and a mentor. It didn't happen, but I finally realized, Max, you need to do what people want to pay you to do. And what they want to pay you, or what they're interested enough to at least have conversations about, is how do you get books so that you can tell your story and get more exposure for your books, your business, your products and services. Mm-hmm. And so a year and a half, 2 years ago, or no, maybe it's about a year and a half, I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to find out if it'll work first, because it may work for me, but that doesn't mean it'll work for other people. So I reached out online. I found 3 people who were willing to not only have me get them bookings, but were also willing to do the work of giving me all the information that we needed to create a proper bio for them, and then discuss what their story is and the best way to tell it, and then decide what kind of shows would be good for them to appear on. And I worked for these 3 people for free: Alex Sikorji, Tim Olson, a.k.a. Timo, and David Steele, who happens to be a songwriter and poet from the UK, who's actually losing his vision. So those 3 people, worked for them on a volunteer basis for about 6 months, and I realized it was working. Mm-hmm. So then I started offering the service to people, and I now have 3 paying clients. But the best thing about it isn't the money, isn't helping people, which I love helping these people get more exposure for their work.
No doubt, yeah.
But the thing that's really cool about it is knowing that people want what you do.
Yeah.
Being appreciated, respected, wanted. Mm-hmm. Wanted. That's the key word, and I hate to admit that, because it makes me sound like a pathetic, needy puppy kind of a person. But the truth is, that's a lot of people want people to want or need them, or to at least appreciate what they're doing to the point where they show interest.
I absolutely agree with you. Recently, I was had a professor on the line, Clayt Bulak, and we talked about human behavior and the 7 needs, and feeling needed and inclusive is absolutely one of these fundamental things. So it's not silly at all that you should say that. That makes absolute sense to me. So where are you going to be doing work next? Do you have anything in the pipeline for yourself, Max? Are you doing any presentations?
Let's see. Am I doing anything? No, I'm going to be doing more radio shows, of course. Mm-hmm. I did my first public speaking event in Philadelphia back in May at an event called DreamCon. The host, Joe Carter, was gracious enough to invite me after having me on his podcast. Mm-hmm. And that went really well, so I want to do more of that. But it's like everything else, it's a matter of continuing to send out those pitch emails until somebody says yes. So,
because this is really essentially about that, is helping get new entrepreneurs or those who are struggling in their business to continually do the things they need to do, not the superfluous things that are not actually going to get traction, and actually keep doing them till they work. And I think that's a big takeaway from this call, Max.
Well, that's true. And one of the things that I've done as far as the Midway Marketplace, my first website, that I hate doing, but it's been the most beneficial thing to that particular business, is the creating of the email list. And the reason that it's so intensive is because of how I created the list. Mm-hmm. In the early days, people wouldn't return my phone calls or my emails. So I thought, what can I give these people that they don't have, that they want or need, and that doesn't cost me any cash money? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, everybody wants web traffic, so I'll offer them links. So I started going out and finding people in carnivals and fun fairs and amusement parks and other types of businesses, and I would get their information. I would create a almost text link for them, and I'd send it to them, and I'd go, okay, I just created this link for you. Here's how it's going to look. All I ask in return is that you agree to receive weekly emails from the Midway Marketplace. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever said no. So out of that, I was able to accumulate over 3,000 email addresses worldwide, and many different segments of the amusement industry. And the email list, which is not only a way for me to tell people about the new stuff, but I noticed that from those lists, those emails that I send out, quite often, people will get one of those emails when they've been working to sell something, or when they're thinking about selling something, and it prompts them to write me and go, hey, how do I get my stuff listed on your website? The other thing about creating the list that is very just grunt work, tedious, intensive, is the method in which you move email addresses from sent emails to address books in Apple. And it's one of those things, there's probably an easier way to do it than the way I'm doing it. I'd almost bet money on that. But between finding them, creating the link, emailing them, and then getting their email address into the proper address book once they say yes, is one of those things that it's just a pain in the butt. But it's been the most, it's been the one thing that I do where I can say, as much as I hate it, that's the most productive use of time if I'm going to be investing time in the Midway website.
Well, that's, there are only a few things that make, small levers swing big doors, small hinges swing big doors, they say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. Just like small steps lead to big leaps, and, big dreams start with small steps. So, yeah, I agree with you. And, what is it they say? They say tidal waves start with throwing one pebble in the ocean. So
yeah,
I couldn't agree with it more. But that doesn't mean I have to like it when I'm doing it.
Definitely not. I thank you for definitely coming on the show today. So when people want to reach out for you, Max, and they might want to engage you for whatever services that you're offering, where can they find you?
Right, they can find me at theblindblogger.net. Or my primary social media is Twitter, where I'm at Maxwell Ivey, and I'd be more than happy to talk to people about getting them on radio shows and podcasts so they can share their story and promote their products and services. And I'm one of these people. I enjoy meeting new people, making new friends, because you really never know what the next person you talk to is going to do in your life, what kind of impact they will have. So. People who are listening to this, don't think you have to have a reason in order to contact me, or don't think that you have to be ready to spend money. I like a good conversation. It's better when you can have them in person with a cup of coffee or a cold beer, but I love opening my email address and getting emails from people who are like, hey, I heard you on Rick's show, and I wanted to ask you whatever. So
yeah, absolutely.
I really do hope people will get in touch with me over at theblindblogger.net.
Well, Max, you are the salt of the earth, and I appreciate you coming on the show today. And for our audience who are listening, there are links, as is the case, below the post. Definitely do that. Reach out to Max, have a conversation, just say hi, and I guess have a virtual coffee with him and see where it goes. So again, Max, thanks for coming on the show, and we will talk with you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I do appreciate how hard people like you work to put on these shows. So thank you very much.